Yeah, don't worry about yourself. You look more handsome than I am. Hi, this is Edip. I am together with Dan Gibson from Canada. Today is what day? It is 4th of December 2018. We had a few conversation via phone. Dan Gibson is known for his research on Mecca, Qibla, or Petra. How do you pronounce Petra, correct?
Petra.
Yeah. I think he has done research for about 30 years. He's an avid, basically, researcher, and I read some of his articles. He has published books on the subject. Can you tell me about your books? What is the title of your book? Do you have it in front of you to share with?
A couple of them. The first one was Quranic geography.
Quranic geography.
Studying the geography of the Quran.
Hold on, I need to increase the volume.
I have one here somewhere. And the second one that came out after that, because when we published the first one, it was just because we discovered a few things. A couple of years later, we brought out the second book. That is this one, Early Islamic Qiblas. Because the first book, Quranic Geography, just looked at all of the geographical references in the Quran. Mecca and Petra was just a small part of that book at the end. People were very interested in that topic, and so that's when we brought out this book.
Can I see the cover of the book? If you show the focus up a little bit more, yeah, more up. I want to see the bottom of it.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, Dan Gibson. Okay, great. Yeah, it looks good. Early Islamic Qiblas. And how many pages it is?
Oh, I don't remember. The first book was about 400 and some pages. This book is only about 280 pages, so
okay.
It's not as big, but it's a big format. The other book was smaller.
Okay, it is a hardcover. I assume it is available on Amazon.com, correct?
On Amazon, yes.
Okay.
The reason why it's big is because there's some charts that are very large.
And colorful.
To get them so they fit on the page.
I see. Beautiful. Now, can you summarize for someone who doesn't know about your work, first time hears you, what is your basic thesis, and if you could also enumerate for us the evidence supporting your thesis?
Wow, that's huge. Can I first tell you a story? I'm a storyteller.
I love it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was working on studying the archaeology around the area of Petra.
Okay.
And I had to put up a website called Nabataean.net. And after I put it up, a man emailed me and said, "Can I use a picture from your website on my website?"
Okay.
I said, "Sure." And we made a link together, and I looked at his website, and he was suggesting that a picture of a carved camel on the side of the mountain, it's near Wadi Rum, he said that's the great camel of Thamud, that should be near Mecca, and it's up in Jordan, why is it there? And his website said he believed that Islam began in southern Jordan, and that's where it all pointed to. I looked at that and thought, that's a crazy theory. That's one of those, theories that go around, and people, talk about it, but it's just a crazy theory. A year later, I was in Europe, and I was teaching at a college there, and I had nothing to do for several hours every afternoon. I had not brought any work with me, so I went to the library, and I got the book, Sirat Rasulullah, that's the story of Muhammad. And I began to read that thinking, could this take place in northern Arabia? I had lived for 20 years up in southern Jordan, so I knew the archaeology. I traveled all over. As I read through again, thinking northern Arabia, not Mecca and southern Arabia, everything seemed to fit. All the stories seemed to fit. And so I began to pursue this idea. Did Islam originate up in Jordan and not in Saudi Arabia. I decided to take some time off in 2010 and write this up as a paper, thinking I was doing like a conspiracy theory. I would just write this up like, this is the theory, look at this evidence. After about 6 months of research, and I was researching 12, 14 hours a day, after 6 months of research, I realized I had compiled so much information that maybe it was true. I had a hard time to convince myself this might be actually true, because it's just so different from everything else, that the geography of the Quran fits southern Jordan and not Saudi Arabia. And during that time, one of the things I looked at was the earliest mosques. I had heard that the earliest mosques all faced to Jerusalem. And I had visited mosques, and they said they all face Jerusalem. So I had the opportunity to use some modern tools, satellite photos, and I began to look at it. I thought there was 2 or 3 mosques that I knew of that faced Jerusalem. None of them actually faced Jerusalem. They all faced about 60 miles south of Jerusalem. And I thought, okay, they were just off by a little bit. But then I began to become aware of more and more of these. And I began to write other scholars and ask them. In the end, I think there were about 40 different scholars who were writing me and saying, here, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And we began to talk with each other, and I began to compile a list. As you see in this book that I just showed, there is a list here of the mosques that I looked at. So this was I forget what year we did this, about 2 years ago. This was the list of the mosques going down the side. And I wasn't just looking for mosques that faced Petra. I was looking for mosques that faced anywhere. I didn't realize at the beginning it was Petra, but as I got more and more mosques, they pointed to Petra. And I was living just a few kilometers outside of Petra, going in and out of the city on a regular basis, examining all different parts of the city. And suddenly I realized I am at that place. I am standing here where these first mosques pointed. Today, if you go to the website, thesacredcity.ca, you can go to the data and you can look at a tool there that has all the different mosques on it. You can examine all the mosques able to find in the first 200 years of Islam, and you can see where they point and all the data is there. And we're adding new mosques. I have maybe 5 or 6 new mosques to add to that list, which is now over 100 mosques in the first 200 years of Islam. I don't add them until either I personally visit or someone I trust has visited this mosque and made measurements with an accurate GPS to see where they point. And then I put it all together. And so the theory is that Islam began in southern Jordan around the city of Petra, and that Petra had multiple names. Petra is a Roman name, but before the Romans were there, it had other names. It was called Rechem, and during its
it was
time,
called what?
Rechem, R-E-K-E-M, R-K-M.
Okay.
Rechem, and there are multiple other names associated with Petra, and in fact, there were some ancient writers who said that Petra was also named Mecca. The Mecca, where Muhammad was the city of Petra, was one of the names. This is why there's confusion when you're reading Islamic literature. When it says Mecca, it is not necessarily referring just to Saudi Arabia, but it was referring to another city, the city of Petra in the north. And so it had different names by the different people who lived in the city. And I've got a paper there that gives all the different names, including the city of Hijr.
Okay.
The rock, because Petra means rock in Greek, Hijr means rock in Arabic, and so forth. Sila was rock in Hebrew. So you have different names that were attributed to the city, but they all meant the same thing. It meant rock. So that's just a very quick overview. There are 50 different supporting evidences in here as well. none of these stand on their own, like this is absolute proof, but when you have 50 different things that give evidence in the same direction, it begins to build up the case, and you realize there is a very strong case that Petra was the founding and original city of Islam. This is where the Kaaba was, this is where Muhammad was born, this is where all the stories take place. Safa and Marwa are there in the city, everything is there.
Yeah, let me list some of the evidence. First of all, for the record, I want to say, I would like to continue later follow-up of this one because I realize the battery I'm using will have about 40 minutes, and I have also another meeting coming soon. We took a little bit more time now. And I appreciate your work. I'm not yet convinced. For some reason, I will tell you why. But I'm not also passionately opposing it like many do. And I respect your work because it is a scientific claim. It is based on archaeological evidences, based on some text, and it is a verifiable and falsifiable claim. Therefore, I respect this. It is not just, I heard from this Ibn Falan, Abu Filan, and said these hearsay narrations, correct? It is based on scientific evidences. Therefore, I highly respect it, and perhaps after research this subject, what stops me from reaching a kind of conclusion based in evidences, twofold. One is, I'm not a historian. I would love to hear you discuss this issue with some prominent historians so that I could hear both sides. You know, my education in philosophy and law, and therefore it would be nice to hear both sides without fighting with each other, hearing each other, hear both sides. And that will be wonderful. And second, of course, it is the size of the conspiracy, how they manage to entirely eradicate the knowledge about Petra being the Mecca, the origin city, and how they were able to manage. I know that in the history of Islam, there are a lot of distortions made, and major distortions. For example, they changed the meaning of Ummi from Gentile to illiterate, and they claim that Muhammad was not able to read and write, which is a big lie. In fact, insult to intelligence of Muhammad, that he 23 years dictated the Quran and was not able to learn 28 Arabic letters all his life. Anyway, there are...
Everywhere you go, you find that the people of the time, they wrote their names down. There's thousands of inscriptions.
Yeah, and he was a merchant at that time.
Everybody. Yeah, he was a merchant. He could travel.
Yeah, and a merchant, if he's taking notes, should have taken some notes, even in numbers. And the the numerals used that time were Arabic letters, Abjad, Hawas, Hutti, Kalaman, the Gematria. After 200 years after Muhammad, they switch it to Indian numerals and they transfer to Europe. It is known Arabic numerals. Anyway, I know how much distortion is made, and hadith books fabricated centuries later after Muhammad to distort the message, and they fabricated many things. They reverted back slavery into it, and the killing and invading other countries, justification of that, even stoning to death. They got it from Jews, and I do believe it is another distortion made by rabbis. When I studied the Old Testament, I find the word regime is used to mean excommunicate, but later they turn it to stoning to death. And I know how much distortions is made. It is possible. However, it is through centuries, certain rituals could be changed. But if something, and even faith could change, like Christianity, they created idol out of Jesus, never claimed to be God. And Catholic religion, you may get offended, that's fine.
Again, when you have these discussions, there are answers that other side has, and it's good to
Of course.
listen to them and to hear
Yeah.
the different sides and the different arguments on the side.
After Muhammad, there were hundreds of thousands of people who accepted Islam. It was, in fact, the first, how do you say, Muslims going around the world. It was because people nearby towns under the control of Byzantine Empire and Sassanid Empire, they were in groups, accepted the message of Islam. They found it liberating, egalitarian, and justice, a good system, because they saw it was already proven in Medina, a multinational, multi-religious, multicultural community established and good example.
Okay, again, you need to put all these things in historical context. And that's one of the things I find when I'm debating or talking with people, is they often don't see it in a historical timeline. So people say, well, how could they make this change? We're talking only 65 years after the Hijrah. So this is only in the first 65 years of Islam. We don't have a huge number of people in those first 65 years. Plus, many of them were off fighting on the edges of the movement that was moving out, and so changes that were made back.
But if there are
weren't noticed so much by the people on the front. Also, you have civil wars taking place. This is the second fitna, the second civil war, and it's in the middle of that war where the change takes place. So you have to put it into historical context, see what's happening, and then you begin to realize it was not a big conspiracy. I don't think so at all. It was part of the civil war. The two sides broke apart. Each side then had their own Qibla, and then it depends on who won the war, and then did they have time even to settle the Qibla problem. And because people were focused on life and death and fighting and all the things that were taking place. And so the Qibla was, at a certain point, there were several Qiblas that people had. And if you read the book, you'll see I talk about Hajjaj. He comes along and he builds mosques, and they are directed to a third Qibla. He doesn't choose Mecca, he doesn't choose Petra. He chooses a third Qibla in the middle. And so these Qiblas, and then a fourth Qibla gets developed over on the other side. So the Qibla was a big question, but it was settled about 200 years into Islam, and they settled it, and then we have the rest of the Qibla all the way to today. But that's what the archaeology shows. Yeah. It's important to see it in a timeline to understand what was taking place.
Well, if there are a few tens of thousands of people, I would assume that 60 years after Prophet Muhammad, their numbers should reach about 100,000, I think, minimum.
And where were they?
The question is, if they were divided into sects and they killed each other, and unfortunately, and therefore they all in uniform turn in one Qibla, changing the Qibla, it seems impossible, especially if they were hostile groups. Now we assume if one group turned to Mecca, changed the Qibla, their enemies, those who are fighting against them, they would stick with the Petra, and we would say at least historically would have a lot of kind of evidence from the other group, the hostile group. I don't think that they would all be able to be eliminated, all the records. Do you understand what's my concern?
Okay, but when were the records written? The records we have are written 300 years after the beginning of Islam. This is when we're looking at Bukhari and Al-Tabri and so forth. So it had already been settled 100 years before this. And so during their time, it was not a question, unless it's the Karmatians. They're the ones who tried to stop everyone going to Mecca and said Mecca is not the true Qibla. Okay, we have a record of them. They fought against that. They stopped pilgrims from going to Mecca. They eventually killed pilgrims. They eventually went down to Mecca, and they eventually killed pilgrims, stuffed them in their bodies down the Zamzam well, and took the Black Rock and left. And so, I mean, you have this fight going on where people are arguing and saying it is not Mecca. Mecca is not the true place. So this is in history. But they didn't come up with a better solution, because the question at the beginning was, you have the city of Petra, but the Black Rock has been moved to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. So which one are you going on pilgrimage to? Are you going on pilgrimage to the rock? Or are you going on pilgrimage to the pagan city with all the pagan idols where there is no rock? And so that created a problem. How do you answer?
First of all, I do think, Gibson, I think you depicted pretty well. I do think, my understanding of the Quran, there were no statues that time, during the time of Prophet Muhammad. The Meccan idol worshippers, or mushriks, we call those who associate partners with God through idea of intercession or making up prohibitions and religious faith and rituals in the name of God. It is called mushriks. And they didn't have really statues, concrete statues, according to the Quran. And they had certain names, Lat, Uzzat, Menat, and these are, the Quran says, تِلْكَ أَسْمَاءٌ سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ. These are the attributes that you made up. These are certain names that you made up and your parents made up, correct? And statues...
But you go back in archaeology, I can show you statues of Allah. I can show you statues of these different gods. I've got videos that we're making on the YouTube channel. I'm actually 10 videos ahead of the editor. So the editor is just beginning. And
I see.
So we're 10 videos ahead. So we've just done pre-Islamic gods, I think 3 or 4 videos, going through who these gods are, where they were worshipped, where their temples were. And you can go and you can find these temples in Petra, right beside the Kaaba. It said that the temple of Qibla was right beside the Kaaba, and you can go there and see the original Kaaba in Petra, and Qibla's temple is right there beside it.
Interesting.
All the geography fits, and it describes what was in that temple. The Book of Idols, Al-Kalbi, writes on the...
I know Al-Kalbi, yeah.
Yes, and he describes these idols and where they were and how they got there. He describes Qibla as an actual statue with his arm raised, but the arm had been broken off. And so they had to put a golden arm back onto it. So it was a statue and a figure of a person in that one, where many of the others were just square blocks, Beitel, they're called, so they're just blocks or images because they didn't want to make God into an image, so they just used a square block or a triangular block. We show some of these in the film.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, because of you, I think I will visit Petra. I am going to go there. I'm very interested about the subject because, on one hand, your thesis works somehow. It answers some of the questions, like Abraham. Why Abraham went down all the way down in the desert, especially the conditions of those times, and all the way down to Mecca. It kind of seems very plausible with the condition of the time and how difficult terrain it is, and doesn't need...
As I struggled with why he would leave his wife and his nephew Lot, and he would go 1,000 kilometers away to leave Hagar, and then travel 1,000 kilometers back.
Yeah, I think it is
a bit far. And when we did Petra, we realized, wait a minute, here's a valley that has everything that fits, and he only took her about 40 or 50 miles, maybe at the most, away from where he was, and he put her in a valley, and then he went home again.
And the other issue, that the word Becca, and I understand it as a Becca Valley, Valley, and it is already in the Old Testament and is in relation of Abraham. It fits perfectly, and I don't really consider it as another spelling of Mecca, and it is the location. Therefore, I have much more interest because of these few very important questions that it answers your Petra scenario, answers that. And but
once again, none of these are proofs by themselves.
yeah,
It's when you put them all together and you look and say, what kind of picture does this whole thing paint?
yeah. Your claim that there were no other references, there were no references to Mecca in the past, but there are some mentioning that there were in the past there were reference to Mecca and like Claudius Ptolemy and
okay, I've got written a paper on Ptolemy. I have, which I wrote several years ago. I have got a video coming out on Ptolemy because people misread Ptolemy altogether. They look at maps drawn in the 1400s or 1500s or 1600s. Okay, we do not have a copy of Ptolemy's map. Okay, it will say after Ptolemy. So you have to go back and study Ptolemy himself. And all he gives us are coordinates, latitude and longitude that he developed. And Macorba is on that list as one of the cities. When you go there, and I studied this, I took out his whole list, because he also lists rivers, he lists many locations in Arabia. I went and put the 4 rivers that he mentioned onto Saudi Arabia, where the 4 great wadis are that come out of Saudi Arabia. Once we lined those up, everything became clear where Macorba was and what it refers to in Yemen. All the Yemeni things all became clear. But Ptolemy did not realize how big Arabia was, and so he listed it as a smaller peninsula than it actually was. But the maps people are showing me, I say, well, when was that map drawn? And they look and they say, well, it was drawn in 1400. I said, yeah, okay, you're trying to tell me with a map from 1400 that Mecca existed under a different name 1,000 years before that? Because this map is 1400. It's not an early map.
okay.
So there's a whole argument there about Ptolemy, and because you don't have a copy of Ptolemy's map.
Here is a suggestion for you. I don't want to forget. Then,
okay.
What about organizing a panel? You and another historian, if you pick someone or we pick someone, I would be the moderator. For example, at one of the universities, it could be at Stanford University or at University of Arizona, or one of the universities, or could be San Diego. We discuss this issue with some historians who disagree with you, one-to-one, and maybe audience asks questions, because I see you comfortable. I don't want you to be also attacked by people viciously. I know how difficult it is when you come up with controversial theory and there are so many fanatics on opposing side and being the target. But I do think that you are a good person. I don't think any ulterior motive, even if there is ulterior motive, I care less, because ultimately I will look at evidence, not your intention. You know, some people read, oh, that person's mind is this, wants to do this. Who cares? He says 2 times 2 is 4, or 2 times 2 is 5. It is some evidences arguing based on evidence. Therefore, I do think that your theory, which I find some of the evidences and arguments pretty plausible, very interesting, some of them compelling. On the other side, some, questions based on history or based on some of the evidences. Maybe some people claim, no, the Qibla he's using, he thinks they are directing to Petra, they are not. It is basically manipulation. And in order to be able to test in front of educated group of people, good students and professors, what do you think?
The question will be time, because this is a very broad subject. I mean, if somebody says, well, what about Badr, the Battle of Badr? Okay, we could spend 40 minutes just talking about the Battle of Badr. I mean, we're talking 50 evidences times 40 minutes. We could be at it for a week.
No, we should eliminate the evidences that you base on hadith, though I know that, though I don't believe hadith as authentic things, but in order to incriminate, to cross-examine, we can use it, hadith, to show motive. You know, I studied law, hearsay narrations, hearsay evidences are rejected with the exception of some showing contradiction or motive and other things. It can be used. And I do understand you can use the hadith to show the contradiction in their things, that's fine. But we can eliminate those because they can say a lot about that. For example, about the Badr and the war around the Medina, correct? And or Mecca, correct? Why Meccan people came from north.
If you watch the video that's coming out, I placed Badr far north of Mecca, of Petra, okay, in the middle of Jordan.
Yeah.
I'll take you there and I'll show you even the two graveyards, one for Muslims, one for Christians.
It's incredible.
That date back to that period.
Yeah.
I placed Badr in a completely different location.
Yeah, the counter-argument they can come up with, they will say, well, Medina, for example, was surrounded by mountains, the south and east and west, therefore the open one was the north one. This kind of counter-arguments should be responded, because they say, well, they could come from south, but they could still attack from the north because that was the most vulnerable point.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. You can give an answer for every argument on every side. I can answer one way, they can answer the other. And in the end, we may show a disagreement. I interpret the evidence this way, you interpret the evidence this way, and we will prove nothing.
Yeah. But I think there are...
evidence must be interpreted.
Yeah, but there might be some evidences, interpretation of in different way, maybe too kind of forcing the language and stuff, and then less plausible. Therefore, people ultimately, they will judge after hearing both sides. And I wonder whether you are open for this by limiting...
I am, but I would like the topics to be chosen beforehand, because we will just go all over the place.
I see.
If someone says, my strongest argument, I want to talk about the Battle of Badr, because this is what everybody's writing me about, this disproves your theory, then I need to be able to come back and give an answer, and it's not an answer that's going to take 2 minutes to answer, because I need to go back and demonstrate that the records that were written about Badr and what it says and what the later one said and how the hadith...
What about this? What about this? You pick, for example, you pick 5 or 6 the strongest evidence that you think in your case, that the debate will focus on those alone, not the rest. You can mention them, you can say there is a list of corroborating smaller evidences, but these are the major ones, and that within the short time, let's say 2 hours, we can discuss this. And I think that will be a great service.
That would work if each side had their 5 best arguments.
Exactly. And then ahead of the time, you share with each other, so that because the purpose is not to just win a show. It is about the evidence to be really understood and shared properly, not over there to just with the rhetoric and the wordplay or the time element using it to gain points. It is not the purpose. Therefore, whatever each is right, therefore initially you should communicate, discuss this issue, you are ready about it, and in front of the people if you discuss it, and later people ask questions, and without attacking the person ad hominem attacks, I think it will be a great service, gentlemen.
Okay. That, I think, is good, as long as someone actually reads the arguments and is prepared to answer them.
Beautiful.
Just to give an example, example, Adnan Ibrahim has put a bunch of stuff on the internet. I've been going through some of the stuff he says. I think half of his arguments with me is that he says Muhammad existed. He says I say Muhammad didn't exist. I have never said that. I totally believe Muhammad existed. So half of the stuff he's arguing is with some other scholar and not with me.
I know. And what are the books behind you? It seems some history books, some hadith books.
Oh, I've got Bukhari and I've got Al-Tabari and so forth.
Tafsir al-Tabari, I see written. How many? Go move around. Let's see the other one.
Oh,
there's one.
On the side.
What is it? The on the right side. Tabari, whatever it is. Okay.
Yeah, Al-Tabari wrote several because he wrote the histories. He also wrote the Sunan. So you can go back and see what he said in his commentaries and so forth.
Do you know Arabic? Do you read Arabic?
This is one I've been working through a lot.
Akhbari Mecca. Akhbari Mecca, it is Mecca's news. What is it?
Yes. Yeah, and this is an excellent book to go through because it was one of the earliest sources we have as well.
Whose book is it? Can I see the bottom of it? Let's Akhbari Mecca. Okay. Mektabatun Nafidha. Okay, and the top, the subtitle, okay, وَمَا جَاءَ فِيهَا مِنَ الْإِثَارِ the evidences, archaeological evidences.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see when he wrote this, so. This is why it's good to prepare for a debate, so I have the stuff right in front of me. I don't have to
okay, no problem.
So this goes back. The writer of this story was around when Mecca was the actual Mecca, but he's within 150 years of Muhammad.
Okay.
Okay, so this is very important. I based the evidence of the Kaaba that I found in Petra on his measurements and his descriptions. Okay. So this book is not in English. I have not seen this book in English anywhere. So it has not been translated in English.
Okay, beautiful.
So there's quite a few books like that around.
I have I'm not historians, but I have a historical correction regarding the translation of one of the verses of the Quran. The chapter Rum, the beginning of the chapter Rum, I do argue that it is misread, mispronounced, and distorted just the opposite. It is read as غُلِبَتِ الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون. It is read this way. I assert that the real reading, the original reading should be غلبت الروم, not غُلِبَت. غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض.
Do you base that on any early copies of the Quran?
I base it on reason and original history of Islam, and I can tell you why. The reason
I understand that, but there are many early versions of the Quran. You need to go through them. A lot came out of Yemen. There are thousands.
No, the original version of the Quran would not have those diacritical marks regarding pronunciation. They didn't have.
Correct.
It could be read either غُلِبَتُ الروم or غَلَبَتُ الروم. Therefore, for initially few centuries, they didn't have those lines. And therefore, either reading, which one makes more sense? I do think that the current reading doesn't make sense. It is major contradiction. Because early confrontation, it was between Muslims and Romans. And during even time of Prophet Muhammad. And therefore, and the Muslims being happy with Romans winning a war doesn't make sense. In fact, the Roman Empire killed many Muslims in, nearby, in Syria, around that area. And what happens? The Quran says, غَلَبَتِ الروم في أدنى الأرض. The Romans became victorious in closest, the lowest part of the earth. Adna al-Ar means lowest, the biggest depression, which is Dead Sea area. And فَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ سَيُغْلَبُونَ. After their victory, they will be defeated. and the believers will be happy with this. And it happened within few years after Prophet Muhammad in Yarmouk, Battle of Yarmouk. And this is very interesting, and I do understand the motive why they pronounce it differently, because later they wanted to declare Byzantine Empire as arch-enemy to attack the sultans, to attack Byzantine Empire. No, I'm sorry, Byzantine, Iranian, Persian Empire, in order to make them enemy, and they read it the other way around so that Muslims will be happy with Roman Empire against the Persian Empire, in order to kind of target them, make them the bigger target.
I can understand your argument, but I still think to support it, like I always want to see empirical evidence. Go back, pull out the early manuscripts, see did anybody vowel it differently than the way it is voweled today. You would be surprised. There are many different vowelings. There are many different verse orders in those early Qurans.
I want you to check. This is a question for you, and kind of historically, maybe based on other, you have more in history. Just a question mark for you. It is an issue that to be studied. My argument is based on basically reason of the Quran. I don't think that believers would be happy with the victory of the Byzantine Empire. It was an imperialist, pagan, like I'm saying mushrik, like the Persian Empire.
Again, I understand, but it's just all I'm pointing out is that approach is different from my approach.
I see.
Because that approach is using reason, and looks reasonable. But I'm the kind of guy I want empirical evidence.
I love it.
If I have a debate with your scholars, I want to see empirical evidence. What do you base this evidence?
That's the reason I am telling you. Therefore, I put a question mark in your mind so that you could investigate it later, inshallah.
I don't have time to investigate. I mean, I have emails pouring in every day from people all over, and half of them are people with their suggestions. I have no time to chase down their suggestions because I'm working on the things that I see is happening and not their suggestions.
Okay.
So, I thank you.
You're welcome.
That is not something I will see how we'll get to in the future.
No problem. And looking forward to meet you again. And I recorded from the beginning through my camcorder, and somehow I forgot to record here. 2-3 minutes later, I recorded through the Skype. We noticed that Skype has recording function too. And right now it is about 40 minutes. And thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And hopefully I'm going to talk with some universities to organize a beautiful panel and find the right person who could discuss this issue with you, inshallah.
Okay.
God willing. And this is an invitation also for those who would like to engage in academic scientific discussion with Dan Gibson. Peace.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. How is the weather there? We didn't talk even about weather. Do you have snow there?
It's -10.
Oh my God, here is beautiful. We have 50 degrees, 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
I have no temptation to go outside. I just stay inside and study.
Okay, take care. Peace.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well, the purpose was not to really in detail do the discussion because I'm not a historian, but to start the engagement, and hopefully we'll organize a panel. And I would like under this video for you to suggest names of scholars who would be interested in debating this issue with Dan Gibson, and we'll pick one of them or two of them, and then we'll have a panel, a conference in one of the universities, inshallah, and then record that one, share it with the world. Peace. Take care. And meanwhile, my English videos are marked in parentheses with E, letter E for English. If you are searching my English videos, please in your search keywords put parentheses without space inside E It will bring my English videos. I am putting together a playlist. It's not perfect. Some of the videos are not edited. When I have time, I will do so. Take care. Peace. Let the truth shine. The ideas will clash each other and the lightning, the light of the truth will shine. Don't worry. Peace.
What is Islam? What are the sources of Islam? What are the sources of Islam? What is Islam?
Burada sen ifşa oldun.
Nereye?
Gidiyorum.